Men were at work on their battleship in harbor, and it was a typical day. They weren't at war yet, but were ready just in case. This morning seemed as though it would be any other, filled with maintenance and training. Just as they thought this day would be normal, the whirring of planes and screaming of alarms filled the air. It was an air raid. Bombers swooped in from the air as men made their way to general quarters. It didn't take long, and soon, bomb after bomb struck their ship. As if this wasn't bad enough, shortly after the bombs struck and fires had erupted, a catastrophic boom filled the air as the magazine for one of the ship's massive guns exploded. And it wouldn't take long for an outraged America to enter World War II, wrought with vengeance. USS Arizona was a Pennsylvania-class battleship, and her keel was laid on the morning of March 16, 1914, with Assistant Secretary of the Navy Franklin D. Roosevelt in attendance at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. She was launched on June 19, 1915, making it about a 15-month construction, 5 months overshot of their 10-month original goal. About 75,000 people attended her launch, including the mayor of New York City, the governor of Arizona, and many high-ranking military officials. To acknowledge a ban on alcohol recently passed by Arizona state legislature, 2 bottles were smashed on her hull. First, a full bottle of sparkling wine from Ohio, and secondly, another filled with water from the Roosevelt Dam. After the launch, she was towed to the Brooklyn Navy Yard for fitting out. She was commissioned into the Navy on October 17, 1916, and departed New York City on November 10th. She headed south for her shakedown cruise, though outside of Guantanamo Bay, a stripped turbine on December 7th forced her back for repairs, though she did enter Chesapeake Bay and test her main and secondary gun batteries from December 19th through the 20th. The turbine could not be repaired inside the ship, so the yard workers had to cut holes into her upper decks to lift the damaged casing out. It was reinstalled 4 months later. Arizona was built just in time for World War I, and she left the yard after her repairs on April 3, 1917, and 3 days later, the United States declared war on Germany. Assigned to Battleship Division 8, operating out of the New York River, Arizona was deployed only as a gunnery training ship for the crewmen on armed merchant vessels crossing the Atlantic in convoys. Shortly after the war began, 8 of her 5-inch guns were removed to equip merchant ships. When the ship sailed near the wreck of the old San Marcos, ex-Texas, the wreck was sometimes used as a target for the 14-inch guns. Arizona rarely ventured out into the ocean for fear of U-boats, and when she did, it was only in the company of other battleships and escort ships. 4 coal-fired American dreadnoughts were eventually sent across the Atlantic in December of 1917 as Battleship Division 9, but Arizona wasn't among them. Life for Arizona's crew wasn't just training, as the race boat team from Arizona was able to win the Battenberg Cup in July 1918 by beating the team from Nevada by 3 lengths over the 3-mile course. World War I ended on November 11, 1918, with an armistice signed in Versailles. A week later, the ship left the United States for the United Kingdom, arriving on November 30, 1918. After 2 weeks berthed at Portland Harbor in Dorset, Arizona sailed for France. On December 13, 1918, Arizona joined 9 battleships and 28 destroyers escorting President Woodrow Wilson on the ocean liner George Washington into Brest for 1 day on Wilson's journey to the Paris Peace Conference. The 10 battleships departed France the next day, taking less than 2 weeks to cross the Atlantic, and arrived in New York City on December 26th to parades, celebrations, and a full naval review by Secretary Daniels. Arizona was the first in line and rendered a 19-gun salute to Daniels. Along with many of the other members of the recently returned fleet, she was anchored off New York City for the next several weeks and open to the public. If you like my content and want more cool stuff to watch, please check out our new channel, Aviation Disasters Explained. Alright, let's look at the interwar period. Arizona sailed from New York City for Hampton Roads on January 22, 1919. She continued south to Guantanamo Bay on February 4th and arrived 4 days later. The time in the Caribbean waters was mostly used in training for battles and fleet maneuvering, although it included a Liberty visit to the port of Spain. In April, her crew won the Battenberg Cup for a second time before the ship was deployed to France once again to escort President Wilson back to the United States. While the ship was awaiting Wilson's departure, she was redeployed to Smyrna in Turkey in response to tensions between Greece and Italy over the awarding of Smyrna to Greece in the Paris Peace Treaty. Both Greece and Italy had a major warship deployed in the area at the time, the Georgios Avarov and Dyalla. Shortly after Arizona arrived, Greek ground forces arrived in transports and were offloaded in the port. This chaos led to many American citizens seeking shelter on board Arizona. With the crisis averted, she was ordered to Constantinople before she sailed for home on June 15th. She put into the New York Navy Yard on June 30th for an overhaul, and the work was completed January 1920, and she sailed south to Guantanamo Bay for crew training. During this time, Arizona was fitted with a flying-off platform similar to the one given to Texas in March 1919. In April, she lost the Battenberg Cup to Nevada, and in June, she was present for the Naval Academy's graduation ceremonies. In August, she became the flagship of Battleship Division 7, although it was only later in 1920 that the battleship was refitted to be an admiral's flagship. She did maneuvers through the Panama Canal and then met up with the Pacific Fleet to continue with battle maneuvers. She would have an overhaul in New York City and then would head to her new home port of San Pedro, Los Angeles, and she would be based here until 1940. For the rest of the 1920s, Arizona's service consisted of routine training exercises. A recurring theme in these years were the annual fleet problems, which began in 1923 and simulated large fleet actions by having most of the active fleet face off against each other. The first two simulated an attack on the Panama Canal from the west, while in 1925 they attempted to defend the Hawaiian Islands. There were numerous fleet problems, which included the Caribbean, near Central America, the West Indies, and Hawaii. Sometime in early March of 1924, a harlot named Madeline Blair stowed away aboard Arizona, trading intercourse for a free voyage to San Pedro until she was discovered on April 12th while the ship was anchored in Balboa, Panama. She was sent back to New York City, and there was a court-martial for 23 sailors once the ship began her refit in the Bremerton Navy Yard, which imposed sentences of up to 10 years imprisonment. Letters of reprimand went out as well, but they were revoked by Admiral William V. Pratt when he became Chief of Naval Operations in 1930. Arizona was modernized beginning May of 1929 in the Norfolk Navy Yard. This would last all the way until March of 1931. On March 19, 1931, even before Arizona was put through post-modernization sea trials, she hosted President Herbert Hoover for a brief vacation in the Caribbean. The president visited Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Returned on March 29th, Arizona conducted her sea trials at Rockland, Maine, and had another catapult fitted on the top of Turret 3 before she was transferred to the West Coast in August with her sister Pennsylvania. Ironically, in February of 1932, the ship participated in Grand Joint Exercise No. 4, in which aircraft carrier aircraft successfully attacked Pearl Harbor on Sunday morning, February 7th. After returning to the West Coast from another fleet problem in 1933, she was anchored in San Pedro when an earthquake struck nearby Long Beach, California on March 10th. Sailors from the ship joined the relief efforts, providing food, treating the injured, and providing security from looters. In early 1934, the ship and her crew were filmed for the film Here Comes the Navy, which made extensive use of exterior footage as well as onboard location shots. In the early morning of July 26th, Arizona collided with a fishing trawler called Umatilla that was under tow by another trawler off Cape Flattery. 2 men aboard Umatilla were killed in the collision, and the Navy convened a court of inquiry to investigate the incident. The court recommended that the ship's captain be court-martialed. This took place at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, Cuba, while the ship was participating in that year's fleet problem off the East Coast. The captain was found guilty and replaced months later. Her last fleet problem was off of Hawaii in April to May of 1940. At the end of it, the United States Pacific Fleet was retained in Hawaiian waters, based out of Pearl Harbor to deter the Japanese. She was overhauled at the Puget Sound Navy Yard in Bremerton, Washington from October 1940 to January 1941. She was scheduled to depart Hawaii for yet another overhaul in Bremerton in November of 1941, but she'd been in an accident with USS Oklahoma during a training exercise that kept her in Pearl Harbor. Her last sortie was a night firing exercise on the night of December 4th, as part of Battleship Division 1, alongside Nevada and Oklahoma. All 3 ships moored at quays along Ford Island on the following day. On December 6, 1941, the repair ship Vestal came alongside to assist the ship's crew with minor repairs, and the pieces of Pearl Harbor were officially in play. Thank you so much to our amazing YouTube members and patrons. If you'd like to have awesome perks like episodes a full day in advance, join our YouTube memberships today. Alright folks, let's get into the attack on Pearl Harbor. Little did anyone at Pearl Harbor know, the Imperial Japanese Navy's Kido Butai was on its way. If you want to hear a more detailed retelling of Pearl Harbor outside of Arizona's perspective, we do have a video on that, and we do have a video on the Imperial Japanese Navy if you're interested in hearing about the Kido Butai. Shortly before 8 a.m. local time on December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft from 6 aircraft carriers of the Kido Butai struck the Pacific Fleet as it lay in port at Pearl Harbor, and wreaked havoc on the warships and installations defending Hawaii. On board Arizona, the ship's air raid alarm went off at about 7:55 a.m., and the ship went to general quarters soon after. Shortly after 8 a.m., 10 Nakajima B-5N2 Kate torpedo bombers, 5 each from the carriers Kaga and Hiryu, attacked Arizona. All of the aircraft were carrying 16.1-inch armor-piercing shells modified into 1,757-pound bombs. Flying at an estimated altitude of 9,800 feet, Kaga's aircraft bombed Arizona from amidships to stern. Soon after, Hiryu's bombers hit the bow. The aircraft scored 4 hits and 3 near misses on and around Arizona. The near miss off the port bow is thought to have caused observers to believe that the ship had been torpedoed, although no torpedo damage has ever been found. The sternmost bomb ricocheted off the face of turret 4 and penetrated the deck to detonate in the captain's pantry, causing a small fire. The next forwardmost hit was near the port edge of the ship, abreast the main mast, probably detonating in the area of the anti-torpedo bulkhead. The next bomb struck near the port rear 5-inch anti-aircraft gun. The last bomb hit at 8:06 a.m. in the vicinity of turret 2, likely penetrating the armored deck near the magazines located in the forward section of the ship. While not enough of the ship is intact to judge the exact location, its effects are indisputable. About 7 seconds after the hit, the forward magazines detonated in a cataclysmic explosion, mostly venting through the sides of the ship and destroying much of the interior structure of the forward part of the ship. This caused the forward turrets and conning tower to collapse forward, effectively tearing the ship in two. The explosion touched off fierce fires that burned for 2 days, and debris showered down on Ford Island and the vicinity. The blast from this explosion also put out fires on the repair ship Vestal, which was moored alongside. The bombs and subsequent explosion killed 1,177 of the 1,512 crewmen on board at the time, approximately half of the lives lost during the attack on Pearl Harbor. 2 competing hypotheses have arisen about the cause of the explosion. The first is that the bomb detonated in or near the black powder magazine used for the ship's saluting guns and catapult charges. This would have detonated first and then ignited the smokeless powder magazines, which were used for the ship's main armament. A 1944 Navy Bureau of Ships report suggests that a hatch leading to the black powder magazine was left open, possibly with flammable materials stocked nearby. The Naval History and Heritage Command explained that black powder might have been stockpiled outside the armored magazine. The alternative explanation is that the bomb penetrated the armored decks and detonated directly inside one of the starboard magazines for the main armament, but smokeless powder is relatively difficult to detonate. Thus, the 14-inch powder bags required a black powder pad to quickly ignite the powder. The time elapsed from the bomb hit to the magazine explosion was shorter than experience suggested burning smokeless powder required to explode. It seems unlikely that a definitive answer to this question will ever be found, as the surviving physical evidence is insufficient to determine the cause of the magazine explosion. She was placed in ordinary at Pearl Harbor on December 29th and struck from the Naval Vessel Register on December 1st, 1942. She was so badly damaged that she was not salvageable, so her surviving superstructure above the water was scrapped in 1942. Her main armament was salvaged over the next year and a half. The aft main gun turrets were removed and reinstalled as United States Coast Artillery Corps Battery Arizona at Cahey Point and Battery Pennsylvania on the Mokapu Peninsula. Both forward turrets were left in place, though the guns from Turret 2 were salvaged and later reinstalled on Nevada in the fall of 1944 after having been straightened and relined. Nevada later fired these same guns against the Japanese islands of Okinawa and Iwo Jima. Arizona was awarded 1 battle star for her service in World War II. There is a common misconception that she remains perpetually in commission like the USS Constitution. However, this simply isn't true. She is under control of the National Park Service. However, the U.S. Navy retains the title. Arizona retains the right in perpetuity to fly the United States flag as if she were an active commissioned naval vessel. Her wreck remains as a memorial to commemorate the men of her crew lost at the attack on Pearl Harbor. Legislation during the administrations of Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy resulted in the designation of the wreck as a national shrine in 1962. A memorial was built across the ship's remains, including a shrine room listing the names of the lost crew members on a marble wall. I've seen it in person, and it was very harrowing. Upon their death, survivors of the attack were able to have their ashes interred within the ship among their fallen comrades, and many chose to do so. Veterans who served at other times aboard the ship had the option to scatter their ashes in the water above the ship. The last survivor of Arizona, Lou Contour, died in April 2024 at the age of 102. May every man lost on the Arizona, all of the survivors of the attack, and all of those lost during the attack on Pearl Harbor rest in peace, and I thank all of them for their service.